Hello and welcome to KRSE Beyond the Ordinary Webcast Radio, where we are coming to you from a high cliff. Right here with your host, Nancy Elena.
Yes, with Cliff on High, who is already way past, half past human.
Say hi, Cliff.
Hello there. But I'm at sea level, you know. I really wish I had some prominence there, but I'm down at sea level.
Well, the body may be, but not your mind.
Yeah, that's what everybody has to start expanding their thoughts about what's going on. Yeah, it's getting strange out there.
It's getting strange, and I hope that people going to halfpasthuman.com are taking advantage of reading the new articles, as you call them. It is, you know, science fiction writers are visionaries of the future, and it's can be proven throughout history on writing. And what you are doing with those two that I read, the Loonies for Dinner and the Creating New Wealth in the New Salish, and this is the Great Northwest New Salish Beyond the Ordinary Station.
There you go.
They need to read those because you're giving a very strong glimpse into the future.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do, was to take some of our data and do some postulates without getting into the data part. So I wrapped them into a couple little fiction stories so that people would get the flavor of the potentialities that are out there.
It is a very strong flavor, Cliff. They are fabulous.
Well, the hyperinflation one, the Loonies for Dinner, could actually be, it's just a snippet and could be expanded, but it gets just really grim. So if you really need to, after you've read that, if you really want further examples of what it's like, go and research the Weimar Republic from the viewpoint of the French.
Yes. So you did want to give people some updates.
Yeah, we actually have a data stream going at the moment. We'll start our interpretation about a week early because we have to filter out so much of the stolen reports, but that's an aside. But we do have some new patterns emerging in the stuff that's going on in the background. You remember back in the old bad days of the early Bushy years, where they were saying, "Oh, everybody be afraid! Internet chatter is up. You know, something's going to happen, right?" And they'd raise that their color from orange to yellow or whatever it was, and we were all supposed to be afraid. Well, there was some validity in the sense that internet chatter can tell you a lot of what's going on, just at a large macro level. And so even in the expressions of consciousness, which we don't do in our data, right? We don't actually pay attention to what people say so much as aggregate all these words into giant clumps and then make archetypes out of them. But even within the conscious chatter these days, you start finding strange alignments around key dates or time periods, and as it grows from various different quarters, it makes a lot of sense to pay attention. So, for instance, we have any number of economic forecasters saying, A, this fall isn't going to be good, and B, we can look forward to some form of bank holiday, or they're saying we're due for it relative to where we are in this depression based on the last one. And C, they're putting the bank holiday anywhere from August 26th through to about the first part of November. Curiously, there seems to be a clustering around one of our sort of hot periods, which is from September 15th out through October 25th. I actually think that October 25th will be the more dramatic period of time, but it may have to be set up by a number of events prior to that. And it may indeed mean that the bank holidays work out to be in the end of August or the early part of September, for all I know. However, so we have that clustering from the economic realm. And then we have a curious alignment going on right at the moment in not only the astronomy, as I was told by some interesting fellows this morning on a conference call, but also we have this strange alignment of the powers that be in this very intense swine flu conference going on in Washington, D.C. Noting, of course, that that the media, the propaganda arm of the establishment, has just been pimping the idea of swine flu like mad. One kind of wonders, especially since it hasn't killed a whole lot of people. Theoretically, it hasn't even come close to being what regular flu does. But Some other curious components to it are, just like any conference, they have breakout workshops where everybody clusters around on a theme that they're interested in. And one of the more hotly vied for set of tickets is about this whole little conference section entitled, What to Do When People Don't Follow Government Orders. And it's like, why have a title like that unless you're expecting it? And, of course, then you go on in and you start looking at other areas of Internet chatter, which might include, say, law enforcement groups or those people that are allied with them, police auxiliary and all this kind of stuff. And you see that there are ripples going out that seem to center in the forums and so forth that are used by law enforcement. And they're very disturbed as well. There have been rumors all over the place, and some of them are even substantiated, that law enforcement is being prepped, if you will, or primed to be put into a new role here again this fall. And again, in this case, it appears to be relative to the swine flu. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to try and enforce vaccinations. I mean, they'd be a little bit smarter than that. And I think their initial round of swine flu vaccinations will yield no one hurt. Everybody will be just fine, probably because they're going to give them a saline solution or something totally innocuous. And that would be the smart way for them to try and sucker people in to taking the shots en masse. But I think it's coming. I don't think we're looking at people wandering around with guns with orders to shoot you if you don't take the shot, or even necessarily quarantine you. I think that it'll be a little bit different simply because of the logistics involved in that. And we've been over the numbers there, haven't we, before?
Yes.
Yeah, so they would have to have, in order to enforce mandatory shots in a very short period of time, they'd almost have to have, let's say, 1 in 5 Americans as part of the enforcement effort willing to not only take the shot, but to coerce others to do so. And then they'd have to have the logistics to distribute the shots out in mass. Then they'd have to have enough for everybody. Then they'd have to have all these people trained. And so the project grows and grows and grows when you start considering that level of coercion towards taking a shot. That is to say, out-and-out force, do it or I'll hit you with a stick, something like that. So they're probably going to be a little bit trickier and say, perhaps no government assistance, no government bailouts, no whatever they can use as a lever against you in order to have you take their vaccine. And one could certainly say, well, the whole point of it is to enrich the vaccine companies, and there may be some validity to that, but it would seem to be less valid on the face of it simply because the companies that are producing the vaccine are already mega-wealthy big pharma companies. And okay, sure, they need more money, but it doesn't seem that there would be enough rationale to involve government at this level if money was the only motivation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it isn't.
That's what I believe, that I don't believe that money at this stage matters. I've been sitting and doing a lot of thinking both about the data blips we've got, which is to say the internet chatter coming through at a conscious level, that we're able to monitor simply because we're sort of stirring it all up in a big pot. You can look at some of it as it kind of like dissolves, right? Kind of like sort of watching chocolate melt or something like that. You see little chocolate icebergs finally go away, but for a while you can discern their shape. And so we can follow data tracks while it's being processed through. And some of the internet chatter really does seem to go to the idea that there are very much harmful chemicals being put into the vaccine, and that the vaccine itself is not well thought out from the point of view of a vaccine, even if one acknowledges that vaccines are a good thing in general, which I don't. I think our understanding of vaccines is very poor, and we shouldn't be using that approach. For instance, if you look at it statistically, the Salk polio vaccine was introduced not at the beginning of a polio epidemic at a global level, but rather at the very tail end. And these diseases have a tendency to move through populations in what's known as a ladder progression form, and these eventually burn out. So 1% of the populace had polio impacts, quite severe, no doubt. But is that the reason to give the other 99%, immune system degrading chemicals? I just don't buy it. So, but even if one said that vaccines were good things in general, this one stinks. I mean, there's nothing about this that passes the smell test. And I'm not alone in that opinion. Someone was so motivated by that opinion that they went and burned down the house of the CEO of Novartis, who's one of the companies involved in it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, actually, then they went to the gravesite of the guy's mother and stole her ashes.
Well, okay, that's what's happening within the thinking of people regarding all of this. It can come out pretty twisted, just out of frustration and anger and.
Well, and also that our minds have been twisted for years by the propaganda, the violence on television and et cetera. So we can't be expected to behave quite rationally under severe stress like this.
Right. I'm actually surprised that it's such a push on the vaccine, because there are so many ways that have already been used to introduce into water, into food, whatever they want.
Yeah, but a lot of them have failed and are failing, like the big push for fluoride. That's going down, although they were successful with the push for antidepressants and keeping the populace of the U.S. pretty much doped up at that level. But they, because now the situation with the fluoride molecule is somewhat endemic. They've got it out of one system, in the sense of stannous fluoride being used in water treatment for the theoretic benefit of your teeth, over to the fluoride molecules being used within the compounds for antidepressant. But again, it's also one of these things where a larger pattern seems to be emerging. And there were some things I never understood. I would say, hear the idea of, well, they're moving us towards a global one world currency and a one world government. And I'd sit there and I'd think to myself, well, maybe so, but the powers that be, what we call the Illuminati or the Bilderbergers, etc., over the past few, probably thousands of years, but certainly the past 500 or 600 years, have never moved towards consolidated central power, at least at that level. Rather, what they would have is central power that seemed to be nationalistically or religiously centered, such that they could use a divide and conquer on the populace. That's been basically their approach all this time. So why shift? Why would they move towards a gigantic global collective government and or currency which would facilitate that government? And there were, basically the answer comes down to, there was only one reason I could think of that made sense. And in examining my conclusion, I had to go back and I had to examine all of the other aspects of this. This divide and conquer has worked so well.